All right, let's begin this morning with prayer. We're going to be moving into Acts chapter 12, and one of the themes that we're going to see in this chapter is related to prayer. So we're going to take up a hymn from the hymnal that deals with prayer as well. We pray. Approach, my soul, the mercy seat where Jesus answers prayer. There humbly fall before his feet, for none can perish there. Thy promise is my only plea, with this I venture nigh. Thou callest burdened souls to thee, and such, O Lord, am I. Bowed down beneath a load of sin, by Satan sorely pressed, by wars without and fears within, I come to thee for rest. Be thou my shield and hiding place, that sheltered near thy side, I may my fierce accuser face, and tell him, Thou hast died. O wondrous love, to bleed and die, to bear the cross and shame, that guilty sinners such as I might plead thy gracious name. Amen. So anybody have an idea of who the author of that hymn was?
Isaac Watts.
That's a good guess. Probably one of the most famous hymn writers, just not for that hymn.
Gerhard?
Not Gerhard. He wasn't Lutheran. It was John Newton. So the same author as wrote Amazing Grace. We have several of his hymns in our hymnal. We don't have Amazing Grace in the Lutheran hymnal, but we have a couple of his other hymns in the hymnal, and that's one of them in the prayer section. All right, let's review chapter 11 first. So chapter 11, we had the meeting that followed Peter's visit with Cornelius. So on the back side is the worksheet for chapter 11. What happens after the church finds out about Peter's visit to Cornelius?
They criticized him for being in Gentiles.
Yeah, so he was criticized. Depending on what translation you have, there's going to be a different word that's going to be found in there in verse 2. But they were not happy with what Peter was doing. And they said, hey, this is something that you shouldn't be doing, because he entered a Gentile's house, and he allowed Gentiles to enter a Jewish house as well with Simon the tanner. What does the Bible refer to when it says circumcised and uncircumcised? Now, there's a little bit of variation between this, but the Bible will use these terms in a couple of different ways. So,
Circumcised would be Jewish.
Okay, so generally circumcised would be Jewish.
Uncircumcised would be Gentile.
Would be Gentile. Okay, so that's the basic way that it's used early on. Later on in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul is going to use it in a different way. How is it used later on in the Apostle Paul's letters in particular? Anybody know?
Believers and unbelievers.
Yeah, in essence, he talks about believers and unbelievers. So he'll speak about, for example, uncircumcised of heart. So the idea of rejecting God, being outside of the family of God. So that picture of circumcision, that would then be carried over into the New Testament church, that means separation from God. So literally a believer or an unbeliever. Good. Number 3, Peter defends his actions by giving 5 proofs that demonstrated that that is the meeting with Cornelius, was from God. What's the first one? Verses 5 to 10.
God gave Peter a vision.
Okay, so that's not the first one though, right?
God came to give you thanks.
Oh yes, okay, he's recounting it. I'm sorry, I'm thinking back to chapter 10. Yes, so Peter starts off with the fact that he had the vision of the sheet. Verses 11 and 12, what's the second one?
3 men stood at the door.
Okay, so the 3 men from Cornelius come and they knock at the door and ask him to come along with them. Third proof or evidence.
Spirit said to go with them.
Okay, the Spirit up on the roof. He's up on the roof. He sees the vision. He says, no, 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 3 times as the Lord repeats the vision. Finally, the Spirit says, hey, there are 3 men at the door. Go along with them. So there's the third evidence. Verse 15.
Cornelius told Peter what the Holy Spirit said to him.
That That would be one also. Verse 15, though, would be what?
Holy Spirit.
Yeah, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit on the Gentiles is the fourth evidence that's there. Yeah, he doesn't, so verse 13 is he reported to us. Did we get those in the right order? The three men. So actually, I missed one. So verses 13 and 14, you have 11 and 12. There's 2 in 11 and 12. So number 2 actually has 2 different ones. There's the 3 men in verse 11. The Spirit told him in verse 12. So you actually have another evidence that's found in there. Verse 15 is that the Holy Spirit was poured out on the Gentiles. And then verse 16.
Baptized with water.
Yeah, so he's remembering that this is a fulfillment of what Jesus had foretold. That John, and Jesus later on too. So John said, I baptize you with water, but there's one that's coming after me that's going to baptize with the Holy Spirit. And then Jesus repeats that, and he says, not long, and I will pour out the Holy Spirit on you. So it was a fulfillment of what Jesus had foretold. And so after laying all of this out, how does the church respond?
They changed their mind.
Yeah, they change their minds. They glorify God. They realize we made a mistake. We shouldn't have been holding to these legal man-made standards. We realize that yes, this is from God. This is God's desire. So they glorified God in the end. And question number 5, what begins to happen in the evangelism of the church following this event?
It grew again. Many believed.
Okay, so yes, we have that idea of many believing again, but there's kind of a unique change that begins to take place now.
Be scattered.
Okay, they're scattering, and those that are scattering, the ones that are scattered, who are they preaching to?
Gentiles.
The Jews.
The Jews to begin with. The ones that are scattered from Jerusalem are just preaching to the Jews. But now we have this other group that Dave was talking about that are coming from, remember where they were coming from? If you have your map.
Cyrene.
From Cyrene, and that's the place in northern Africa. And what was the other place? Cyprus, which is the island. So people were coming from there. They're outside of Jerusalem, and they come. They're in Antioch and these other areas, and like Dave said, they're preaching to the Gentiles. So now what the change is that they're not limiting their preaching to just the Jews. The church starts to realize this is for more than just the Jewish people. This is for the Gentiles as well. So there's a change in the group of who people are going to, who they're talking to about Jesus.
So the Greeks are considered Gentiles?
Yes. So again, depending on the translation that you use, sometimes your translation will use Greek. And it doesn't mean Greek in the sense of the literal person from Greece. It's the Greek word it means anybody who's a non-Jew in essence. So we would use the term Gentile there often. All right. So question number 6 is a geography quiz to make sure that you understand where these locations are. It's important when we're doing, especially when we're reading through a place like the book of Acts, to remember the locations that we're seeing, just to get an idea of where everything is taking place. So let's see here. Kayla, can I borrow your map?
Yeah.
So and some of your maps are going to vary. She's got the other map that's there too. So Jerusalem. Usually when I draw these maps, and I've started to realize this, so again, this one's backwards, because the blue it's not water, that's land. But a lot of times when I draw this map, and Mr. Wales probably does the same thing, you just draw this little horseshoe thing on the sideways, and then you draw in the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River and the Dead Sea. And I always make that a lot bigger than it actually should be. It's actually really, really small and towards the bottom of all of this. This map doesn't have it on it, but if you look at the other map, this one actually isn't very good at showing where it is either. But if you look at one of your other maps, you realize it's way down here towards the bottom that you have the Sea of Galilee. So the Sea of Galilee is south of Damascus, and Damascus is about halfway up. So Jerusalem, pretty important to know where Jerusalem is. So between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River, it's going to be in between the two. Going down, Joppa is next. Joppa is the seacoast city. What happened in Joppa?
Was that Jonah and the whale?
So yes, it does have some Old Testament roots too. But in the book of Acts, what happened at Joppa?
That was Paul. Saul.
That's where Peter was staying when he met.
Yes, so in what we've covered so far, that's where Peter came. What brought him to Joppa to begin with? Does anybody remember? The woman who had died. Remember, he was in Lydda, which is further inland, and they called to him because, what was her name? Dorcas, right? So they called for him. That's what brought him to Joppa, and he stayed with Simon the tanner there until Cornelius came to get him. So that's in the city of Joppa. Today, the city is still there, just like Jerusalem is still there, but it's called Jaffa. Today, they've changed the P to an F. And it is really interesting. They built a church on the site, which supposedly was Simon the tanner's house. So you can actually see up the coast. Tel Aviv is just up north of there, which is the big city in Israel today. Caesarea. Now again, there's two Caesareas. The one that we're concerned about is the one north of Joppa. That would be, it's called Caesarea Maritima, Caesarea by the water. That was built by Herod the Great. That's where Cornelius was. And that was the seat of the Romans in the time of Jesus. That was their main capital place, because it was this place that was named after Caesar by Herod. Phoenicia is a region. Kayla has done her homework here. She's got Tyre and Sidon circled. So you won't find it on this map, but the place where Tyre and Sidon is located, that's the region of Phoenicia. So the Phoenicians were a seagoing nation. They did a lot of sailing and trading by boat. And some of the Canaanite nations were Phoenician in their blood. So Tyre and Sidon is the region of Phoenicia. Cyprus, we have to go out into the Mediterranean Sea to the island of Cyprus. That's going to become an important place to remember in the next couple of chapters too, because some of the mission work is going to take place in Cyprus. Remember, people have come from Cyprus, and now they're going to send people back to Cyprus as well. Antioch, further to the north, way up at the top up here, so almost the northern part of the Mediterranean Sea. That's important. Why is Antioch important? Why has it become important?
That's the first Christian church.
Yeah, that's where it's not the first Christian church, but that was where they were first called Christians, in Antioch. And Antioch is probably the third most important city in the empire. Antioch would be from a church perspective. So Rome, very important. Way down here to the south, it's not on this map, but what was the big city in northern Africa that would become a very strong Christian stronghold?
Cyrene.
Well, Cyrene is further out, way over here, but it would be about right in here somewhere. Alexandria. So that was the city that was built by Alexander the Great, humbly named after himself. That's where he put his great library. He gathered books from all of these different empires that he conquered and built a library there. No longer in existence, but that became a very important Christian stronghold in Africa, Alexandria. So Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem.
Was that library burned?
Yes, yeah, historically. Right.
What was his name again?
What's that?
What was the name of the guy that...
Oh, that I don't know. It was after
He was like the emperor, right?
Yeah, was it Marcus? No, that would have been in Jerusalem. I don't think he did any traveling. Nathan, do you remember who it was that burned Alexandria? I can't remember offhand either.
What's the question?
Who burned Alexandria? I was thinking it might have been one of the Roman generals in one of the battles with the Egyptians, like Marcus Aurelius. He was down there, but I can't remember for sure.
He was in with his sister. His sister was also ruled. They both ruled together.
Yeah. I'm trying to, yeah. Anyway, so after Antioch, you have Cyrene. That's way over here. That's another city in northern Africa. That's where, we talked about that, was where another Simon came from. The one that carried the cross of Jesus was from Cyrene. So there was a Christian group in Cyrene.
Was it Nero?
I don't think it was Nero, because Nero burned Jerusalem. Rome, sorry. Nero burned Rome, but blamed it on the Christians. But that wasn't Alexandria. Yeah.
Julius Caesar.
Julius Caesar, okay. I should have thought it was. I knew it was a Roman leader. I couldn't remember which one it was. So it's Caesar. All right. Tarsus, that's going to become important too, all the way up here at the top, north of the Mediterranean Sea. That's where Saul was from, and where currently he was there before Barnabas came and got him to bring him to Antioch. And then lastly, you have the region of Judea, which would be down here surrounding Jerusalem. Again, a region, not a city. So kind of having those locations in the back of your mind is helpful with some of these journeys that we're going to be going on. I'll have another map for you as we get into the journeys of the Apostle Paul moving forward. We're going to get a bigger map that covers a little bit more of the Mediterranean area to follow the journeys of the Apostle Paul. And so I see that Sandy found one. It looks like some of you other ones have found it too. In the back of, can I borrow it for just a minute? In the back of your Bible, generally you're going to have a map of the journeys of the Apostle Paul. Sometimes they put all 4 of them on one map, and sometimes they divide it up into 2 maps because he goes a little bit further. Yeah, it goes this way, but it kind of fills in what's over here. So yeah, that's just basically this area right here.
Oh, there should be a...
All right, so chapter 12. And before we get into chapter 12, a couple of things I'd like to review. We've talked about the book of Acts being the acts of the Holy Spirit. And we've seen the theme, the word of the Lord grows, over and over again. That's going to come up again in this chapter. That's Franzmann's summary of the book of Acts. We see that the church grows, and the church grows through the preaching of the word. And so we've kind of tried to highlight that in all of the chapters as we've been going through that. We see a lot of miracles, but it's the word that's building the church up. It's the word that's strengthening the faith of those who are believers, and it's the word that's bringing people out of unbelief and to Christianity as well. So God builds up His church both, we might say, internally as well as externally through the power of His word. We don't want to lose sight of that as we go through the book of Acts, that's the means that God uses to accomplish His will. But there's a couple of other things that we can learn from the book of Acts too. The book of Acts describes the church. And it tells us, as we read through the book of Acts, it tells us how the church gets organized and why. It talks about how the church deals with controversies, how it focuses on the word and prayer in order to deal with those controversies. It talks about how Christians treat other Christians and how Christians are to treat those who are not Christians. So these are very practical things if you think about it, aren't they? These are things that we still struggle with today. And so when you're reading through the book of Acts, it's really important to realize, well, this is a 2,000-year-old book that has nothing to tell me today. There's all kinds of important things that the Scriptures are teaching us, the Spirit's teaching us through these chapters that are extremely practical in our use today as the church. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this. And as I mentioned, one of the themes that we're going to talk about today is prayer. So, how many chapters are there in the book of Acts? This is a quiz I like to do with the kids. How many chapters are there in Matthew? 28. Now this is important because when I tell you to learn something from Matthew chapter 29 for next week,
We're done.
right, it's over. So Matthew is 28 chapters. How many chapters are there in the Gospel of Mark?
16.
16. How many chapters in the Gospel of Luke? Close. 24. So if you think about Easter or the Great Commission, some of those familiar things at the ends of these Gospels, it can kind of you just remember what chapter it's in. So the Great Commission's in Matthew chapter 28. The resurrection appearances in Mark 16. Luke chapter 24 is the 2 men on the road to Emmaus. How about John? John has 21 chapters. So the book of Acts, I heard somebody said it. How many chapters in the book of Acts? 28 chapters in the book of Acts. Prayer is mentioned 30 times in the book of Acts, which averages to over one per chapter. Now there are a handful of chapters that don't mention prayer at all because of the topic of the chapter, but there are some that mention prayer more than once, and this is one of them. It's mentioned twice in chapter 12. We're going to see it come up twice. And when the church deals with persecution, when they deal with trouble, when they realize that there's help that is needed, or they want to give God glory for some sort of deliverance or for His blessing as the word spreads, what does the church do? It prays. And so we're going to have a little bit of a glimpse here of what the church looks like. What does the church do in times of trouble? It comes to the Lord in prayer. And what's really interesting, I think, about this chapter is that, so some of you are familiar with, this is a familiar Bible story, or at least a portion of it, that what I think is so ironic about this is that the church is praying for Peter. He's in prison. And they're praying for Peter, and the Lord delivers Peter and brings him to the house where everybody's praying. And the woman, when she opens the door, says, "It can't be Peter." And then he tells everybody that's praying, and they say, "No, it can't be Peter." So here they are praying for Peter, and when the Lord answers their prayers, it's almost like they can't believe that the Lord would answer their prayers in that way. We don't know exactly what they were praying for. That's important for us to remember. They're not always praying, "Lord, deliver Peter," but be with Peter, etc. But it's kind of interesting to see how sometimes when the Lord does answer our prayers, it's hard for us to even imagine how He was able to do that. So chapter 12, the first 5 verses, gives us a little bit of an introduction. We probably could take a week just to study the Herods, because the Herods are one really messed up family, and there's a lot of them. They play a lot of different roles along the way. There's Herod the Great, who built Caesarea Maritima and killed all of the babies at the birth of Jesus. So he's the patriarch of the Herods. The Herods were descendants from Esau, so they're related to the Israelites, if you go back far enough. But they had been given rule over Judea and the regions surrounding, depending on the generation. So we're at a grandson now. So there was the Herod he was alive during the ministry of Jesus, killed John the Baptist, etc. That's the second generation. We're now at the third generation. This would be Herod Agrippa the First, the one that's mentioned here in Acts chapter 12. And he, like his grandfather, was not a very nice guy. Most of them weren't. So we're going to talk a little bit about Herod, both at the beginning and the end of chapter 12. So is there a volunteer to read the first 5 verses about Herod Agrippa?
It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. When he saw that this pleased the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him.
All right, so a couple of interesting things that Luke gives us. Remember, Luke was a historian. And so we already took a look at the times and the places where Luke says we or they when he's with Paul and when he's not with Paul. We're going to get into that more later on. But it's interesting what he tells us here. So first of all, Herod kills whom? James. Now this is another one of those names. We've had a lot of different Simons. The other common name that we find in the Bible is James, and we can get confused with the different Jameses. This one tells us very clearly this was one of Jesus' 3 special disciples, Peter, James, and John. So it was James, the brother of John, that was put to death. So this is the fisherman. He was the one who was with Jesus at the Transfiguration. He set aside in the Garden of Gethsemane, went in to see the resurrection of the daughter of Jairus. So he was part of Jesus' inner circle. He's put to death. And when he realizes that this is sort of an exciting thing for for the people, they were glad that he had done it. He then arrests Peter also, who's also one of those three special inner circle disciples. And we're told that it happens during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Later on it mentions the Passover. So this is at the exact same time of the year as what? As the death of Jesus. So this is so you think about everything that was going on when Jesus was arrested, when he was put to death. Pilate's, I'll set someone free for you. I do this every year at this time of the year. So all of that was this festival that's going on. And it kind of reminds me just a little bit of Christmas today, in the sense that people have taken a religious holiday and they've twisted it into something that is just secular in nature. And Herod was doing the same thing. They've turned it into a big party, but it has really nothing to do with, it actually takes away from the real meaning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread and Passover and what was going on. And we see the same thing with a lot of religious, whether it be Easter or, you look at all these religious holidays and how the secular world tries to take over them, and how the devil uses that in order to cause us to lose sight of what is really going on here. So that's an interesting thing. I think one of the most interesting things about these first 5 verses is what Herod does. He puts Peter in prison, and what do you notice about verses 5 and 6?
Praying.
Say it again.
Praying.
Okay, yes, they are praying. We're going to get to that in verse 6. Something else that kind of stands out. Michael?
The fact that Herod went above and beyond in restraining Peter.
Yeah, doesn't that seem a little bit like overkill? He arrests Peter, and how many guys does he entrust to watch him?
16.
16 soldiers. Does that strike you like that's overkill? Did the guy kill anybody? Mass murder? Did he set off a bomb somewhere? No, this is just one of the followers of Jesus. But the fact that he doesn't want anything and this is going to be important as we go through the rest of the chapter. As we see what happens later on and how the Lord delivers Peter. It doesn't matter how many soldiers Herod puts on Peter. It's not going to stop God from setting him free if that's what he wants. But there's this idea in Herod's mind that this is the worst criminal ever, and he can't let anything get him out of prison. He has to use him for his own political purposes. All right, so yes, Don mentioned prayer. Verse 5, Peter was kept in the prison, but prayer for him was being made fervently by the church to God. So here's our first reference to prayer in the chapter. And they know what happened to James. They know what could possibly happen to Peter. And so they're taking it to the Lord in prayer. All right, any thoughts? Verses 1 through 5.
Quick question.
Yes.
Since we know it's near Passover, is this exactly 1 year after the resurrection, or is it multiples of years after?
So I was wondering about that too, and I don't know that we can actually nail that down. There's a lot that has happened here, and whether it was 1 or 2 years later on, my gut tells me that it's been more than a year, just when you take a look at the development of the church. But I don't know that we can actually pinpoint when. That's a good question. I had the same thought too. Any other thoughts? All right, let's pick it up. Verse 6. Let's go 6 to 11. Dory, do you mind keeping going there?
The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Quick, get up," he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and sandals," and Peter did so. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were anticipating.
All right, so you have the deliverance of Peter in this section. This is pretty amazing. So you think about these 16 soldiers that have been, they're given responsibility over Peter. And it's just amazing to see the miracles that take place here. So what's one of the miracles?
His chains fall off?
Okay, so he's chained, and the chains fall off of him. That's one miracle. What else?
The doors open by themselves.
Okay, so that's the last one at the very end. They're walking out, and the gate literally just swings open, and they walk through. That's a pretty amazing miracle, okay? So you think if you're going through the steps of all of this, it's like, well, okay, now we're out of the cell, but how are we going to get out of the prison? And the gate just swings wide open. What else?
We did walk past the guards.
All right, so and that happens a couple of different times through this. So there were two guards probably at the cell doors, and they simply just walk through the cell doors and out without being seen or spotted by the guards. The one that really intrigues me is the two guards that he was chained to. And Luke tells us that he shines a bright light and he's having a conversation with Peter, and these two guys don't wake up. The chains fall off of him. He says he's getting dressed and all of this. He's putting all of his stuff on, and out he goes without these two soldiers even waking up. And then they walk through a door where there are other guards, and then they get to the gate, and the gate swings wide open, and out Peter goes with the angel. There's just a series of events here that are all taking place that the Lord says, I'm in control. There's nothing that is too great for me to deliver you from, no matter what it is that we might face in this life. So you think about the Romans 8 section where Paul speaks about we are more than conquerors, neither life nor death, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. There's nothing that can separate us from God. No matter what we might face in this life, the Lord reminds us, I'm greater than whatever that might be. So he delivers Peter, and to begin with, what's Peter's thought as this starts to take place?
It's a dream.
Yeah, he thought he was in a dream. He thought he was just dreaming what was happening until when? When does he start to realize, this is not a dream?
The angel leaves him.
Yeah, when he gets out onto the street outside of the jail and the angel leaves and he realizes, nope, this is not a dream. This is very real. All right, so the Lord has set Peter free. Now notice there's nothing in here that tells us too much. We hear that it's the festival of unleavened bread. The Passover is going on. We're going to get a little bit more information in verses 12 and following. So 12 to 17. Is there another volunteer to read? All right, go ahead.
So when he had considered this, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. And as Peter knocked at the door of the gate, a girl named Rhoda came to answer. When she recognized Peter's voice, because of her gladness, she did not open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter stood before the gate. But they said to her, "You are beside yourself." Yet she kept insisting that it was so, and so they said, "It is his angel." Now Peter continued knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. But motioning to them with his hand to keep silent, he declared to them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. And he said, "Go, tell these things to James and to the brethren." And he departed and went to another place.
All right, so here's the result of that. Peter's set free. He gets out on the street. He goes to whose house?
Mother, Mary.
Mary's house. Why is that important? Now, we've talked about Simon. We've talked about James. We throw in a Mary there because there's a lot of Marys too. But this time he tells us who this Mary is. Who is this Mary? Okay, so this is the mother of what we might call him John Mark. So this was most likely the very same house where Jesus had celebrated the Lord's Supper with his disciples on Maundy Thursday evening. There was a house there in town. We could talk a little bit about why that's the possibility, but John Mark is a pretty important character. We're going to see him at the end of this chapter being involved with Saul or Paul and Barnabas in their first missionary journey. But it was in Mary's house that there was a church in Jerusalem. So we're in Jerusalem. He goes to her house. This is a meeting place of the church. They're gathered there. They're praying. Rhoda answers the door. It sounds like, from just listening to it, that she didn't see him. She just recognized it was Peter's voice on the outside. She forgot to open the door, runs back and tells everybody inside the house. So think of like a gate, maybe not your front door, but in Jerusalem, a lot of times in big cities like that, they would have a gate into a little, like you might call it a courtyard, and then the door to the house. So he was probably out on the street. She hears his voice through the courtyard door. And remember, still at this point, Christians were being a little bit nervous about who they opened the doors to because of the persecution that was going on, especially with James being put to death and now Peter being arrested. They weren't just going to open the door for anybody. So she tells everybody, they're discussing all of this. Peter's still waiting and knocking outside. And so finally they let him in. And we have his message is found in verse 17. What does he tell them? Again, this is a small little thing, but it's instructive. When we look at just one little verse like this, there's a lot that we can learn from this one verse.
The Lord had brought him out of prison.
Okay, so he says, number one, the Lord's delivered me. You've been praying about this. The Lord has delivered me.
Told them to keep silent.
Okay, so, which is
Tell
interesting.
James.
Yeah, so to tell James. So again, we're back to James again. Now, we know that this is not James, the brother of John, because he is dead. There was another James, if you remember your list of the apostles. There was another disciple whose name was James. Sometimes he's called James, the son of Alphaeus. Sometimes he's also known, poor guy, as James the Less. He wasn't as important as James, the brother of John, who was James the Greater. But we don't find him having a very strong role in the church either. Why would Peter tell James what has happened? This would be James, the brother of Jesus, who was not a Christian prior to his resurrection, but it was James, the brother of Jesus, that becomes very, very influential and the leader of the church in Jerusalem. So what Peter is saying is, you need to let the guy who's in charge know what has happened here. And why does he tell them to tell James? What does Luke tell us right after that?
Because Peter's going to leave and go somewhere else.
Peter's heading. Why is Peter leaving?
So he doesn't get arrested again.
Okay, so yeah, when Herod finds out that he's gone, do you think he's going to give up the hunt? Not a chance. And he's only going to blame the Christians most likely for Peter being set free. So Peter says, I have to get out of here. Again, so this is a really interesting thing. We don't see fear mentioned in Peter when he's in prison, not knowing what's going to happen the next day. But there's also a certain amount of common sense that God gives to us at times. That we need to use our common sense when we're dealing with the world and say, okay, is this a wise thing? Or is this a foolish thing? So there's a fine line between tempting the Lord and trusting in the Lord. And we see Peter saying, it's not wise for me to stay around, not for myself, nor for the church, nor for the work of the Lord. So he says, I'm leaving. This is why you need to tell James what has happened. So you've got James, the brother of Jesus. Interestingly, it would be this James that's mentioned here that tradition has held was the author of the epistle of James in the New Testament. And if you take a look at if you read through the book of James, the epistle of James, and you compare that to, for example, the Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount and the picture language that Jesus uses, James uses a lot of the same picture language. So sometimes siblings write in similar ways. So whether he was kind of trained the same way, but you see a lot of the same examples. And he wasn't a disciple of Jesus during his ministry. So he probably didn't hear all the sermons that Jesus preached. It wasn't that he heard Jesus and preached that way. This might have been going back even earlier than that. Yes?
So we're talking about 3 different Jameses, right?
Well, we could talk about more if you'd like. But yes.
James, son of Alphaeus, you mentioned him because you know that Peter wasn't talking about him because we don't really hear about what he does. So you're saying, therefore, it must be Jesus' brother James.
Well, that's not just me. Tradition has wrestled with these different Jameses, and we can go into some of the text in order to figure out these different Jameses. There's clues along the way, but in essence, yes, the church has long held that the James mentioned here is James, the brother of Jesus, who also wrote the Epistle of James and was the leader of the church in Jerusalem. That those things are all describing this one James, not James the Less. And the reason that that's important is because a lot of people would assume that it was James the Less because he was an apostle, whereas James, the brother of Jesus, was not. So, but yes, there's a whole bunch of different Jameses along the way that makes things kind of like talking about Marys. You have to look at the details to figure out which Mary are we talking about, which James are we talking about, which Simon are we talking about. Any other thoughts or questions?
I got a question.
Yes?
I think the most fascinating, perplexing part of this chapter is when Rhoda comes to all the disciples. You know where I'm going with this? Rhoda comes to the disciples, and she says that she's seen Peter. And they say, no, it's not Peter. And then they posit this fascinating thing, and they say, very confidently, all of them, it is his angel.
Yes.
What in the world is in the minds of all these Jewish people where they think it is his angel? What do they mean by that? What's going on here?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I don't know that I can specifically answer that. So first of all, the idea of spirits was very prevalent among the Jews. So think about Jesus on the Sea of Galilee. The disciples on the Sea of Galilee, Jesus is walking across the Sea of Galilee, and their first instinct is, it's a ghost. It's a spirit. So the Jews were very much in tune with the fact that there are spirits. So the question is, what exactly do they mean by that? The Jews obviously understood the stories of the Old Testament that talked about angels appearing sometimes in human form, sometimes in some other form. And so I wonder if that's what they're thinking. And by referring to him as his angel, so they could mean his spirit. They could also mean the angel that watches over Peter, although that doesn't make a whole lot of sense if it sounds like Peter. So my gut would be they think this is the spirit of Peter that is returning. So this gets into a little bit of the Jewish mindset of the role of spirits. That is not biblical, of spirits coming back and visiting with human beings, but it was certainly part of what was part of the Jewish mindset, part of their thinking.
Does that mean they thought that Peter had died?
Yeah, most likely. Most likely. To Luke's point.
They're praying for him, but at the same time, like you said, they're human.
Right.
I mean,
right. They don't know what to think. They don't know. So there's a lot of different things that they're going through and trying to wrestle with what exactly is going on. And it's just based on what we have here, it's really hard to know exactly what they're thinking and what they mean by that phrase. It is his spirit or his angel.
But to that point, it doesn't say that they keep praying after they're given that message. So they're praying. Rhoda comes and they're like, oh, that could be his angel. Like maybe he's gone. Maybe it's too late. So then they go and investigate. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
My footnote says, reflects the belief that everyone has a personal angel who ministers to him, referencing Matthew 18:10 and Hebrews 1:14.
Right.
Having the idea that such an angel occasionally showed himself and that his appearance resembled the person under his care.
Right. So that's the other option, is that it's an actual angel as opposed to a spirit of a human being. And that might be more palatable from a theological perspective as opposed to the spirit of the person who has died coming back again. But again, I don't know that we can actually determine which of those two it is. It seems strange to me. I get your footnote says, well, the angel of the person looks like the person and sounds like the person. That seems like a stretch to me. The two passages that are mentioned there, there's nothing in Scripture that says that our angels look or sound like we do, the guardian angels that God has given to us. So that seems like that's more of a stretch to me than just the idea that this was their spirits. But either one of those is possible.
Well, I think sometimes too we forget that the disciples were stuck between this Old Testament and New Testament transition period.
Yes.
And there was a lot of changes that came with that.
There was a lot of learning that they needed to do.
If they were used to this Old Testament understanding and law where God did appear more often. And now they're transitioning to New Testament where this has been fulfilled. It takes time to catch up to all that.
And to that point, that's exactly what the last chapter was all about. Learning what doesn't apply anymore and what does apply. And you're right, they're working through all of this and they're trying to sort through what have we learned incorrectly from our forefathers that has been twisted away from the scriptures. What do we need to throw out and what do we need to hold on to? And this whole idea of spirits or things like that is no doubt a part of the Jewish mindset and the disciples. So keep in mind all of that as we're going through this. All right. I think we're going to have to stop there. So let's close with any questions before we close quickly. All right, we'll pick it up. So we have no Bible class next week. So we're off next week, and then we'll pick it back up again in January with chapter 13. So let's bow our heads and we'll pray. Or we'll close with the blessing. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you now and always. Amen.